your kids look up to you and they assume, or they should, that what you say as an adult is true. And then they get older and they find out that
you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, well, that some of it's just flat out made up, and they have to like find out for themselves what their parents said is true and not. And that brings us to the topic that I want to talk about today, because Jeremy it's always interested me, but a couple weeks ago you were talking about, you were reading books on atheism, and then you see things about deconstructing and reconstructing your faith and things like that. And I would like to get into a little bit of that a little bit deeper than you did in your sermon. So
yeah,
you said you were reading some books that really challenged you and made you
those
angry.
were a few years ago. I read, so Christopher Hitchens is pretty famous, Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, and pretty famous atheists. I mean, like I recognize
all those
names.
Yeah,
they're almost, I mean, especially in the education world, like household names and stuff like that. And so they all three had like access to, and then actually another one is from the comedy world is Ricky Gervais. Like he's huge.
Oh, yeah. I mean, him and what's the guy from HBO, Bill Maher?
Yeah,
Bill Maher?
yeah. So
not Mayer.
Several years ago, I got into a place where with atheism, I was hearing a lot of arguments. I think in deconstruction, we talked about it on the sermon. Deconstruction is a super popular word, and it's where, as an adult, you look back on your faith and you start to be like, huh. Because I think a lot of us, like we're told stories, and stories are presented a certain way as kids so that kids can like understand them, and like I always reference like the Noah story, like the ark, and I'm not going to get into like all the semantics of that story. But one thing is, it's like, there's like this happy story about like, Noah got on the ark with all these like rabbits and these chickens and all this and all these people. And you're like, yeah, but what about all the millions of other animals and people that died? You know what I'm saying? Like we only tell them this part of the story. We don't tell them the other part of the story, but like just stuff like that. But with atheism, there is a whole generation of kids. And like, that's the thing. Atheism wasn't talked about when we were kids. Like
right.
Here were the categories. You either go to church and you're a good person, or you don't go to church and you're going to hell. Like
right.
there wasn't like an educational piece to this of like, hey, there's actually people making some really strong arguments against the existence of not only God, but also the negativity of religion, So I got into a place where I was like, I just want to read what they say, and so God is Not Great was probably, I want to say my favorites because that sounds really bad to say it, but that one was...
we'll clip that for the soundbite.
Yeah. That one was very good. And then Sam Harris is like brutal, like just... I often tell people, if you're going to read this book, like you need to be prepared to read it because like he is brutal. And actually...
But what does that mean, brutal? Like,
he is very well educated, has very good points. I'm not saying he's right, but brings up really good arguments, not only about the existence of God, or at least the way people have been presented the existence of God, but also like the negativity of religion. Like, I mean, he is really brutal about like all the bad that religion has done through human history. And he's actually right. Like there's a lot of really negative, bad things that religion's done. So
and continues to do today.
And continues to do, honestly. I mean, yeah. So, when you read those, I wanted to just see what is the other side saying. And I did them pretty much back to back to back, which was not good for me. Just because it was, I would get mad reading the books, but then also like to do them like that was also like, it's a lot to take in and process and all that stuff. But that did, and I've talked about it before from stage, that started me on my own journey of kind of deconstructing some things and thinking through some things and being like, you know what, maybe the way I've been presented this, and we talk about this a lot, like we've all been presented like an American Jesus.
Right.
And Jesus was not American at all and really not even Western in his thinking. We've been,
well, there was no America. To get started,
Christianity is based on Judaism, or is it extend from Judaism. And Judaism and even early Christianity is an Eastern religion. We've switched it to make it Western in identity, but it's not at all. And I think that changes the way, once you understand that, if you're being honest with yourself, it changes the way that you approach it. So that was the part of my deconstruction part. So I don't know if you have any questions about that, because I could talk about it for a long time, but...
sometimes there's like a sermon and you're like, I really like that kind of stuff. I think is very interesting, and we don't have time in church to get into the weeds of that kind of thing. But I seem to have grown up in the same way you did, where it was like black and white. You're going to hell if you don't go to church, and you're like going to heaven if you do. And you're like, well, this is...
And it was also the categories of good people and bad people.
Right.
And it was like, if you're a Christian, you're a good person. If you're not a Christian, you're probably kind of a bad person. And there's actually a lot of really good people that have nothing to do with Christianity. And there's a lot of really, to be honest with you, say this, awful people that are Christians. You know. So.
Well, so like whenever you would come across somebody who would say like, oh, they're, and I mean, I don't have this in my circles anymore because my circle is so small, but if you were in college or things like that and people are like, I'm Buddhist or something, they're really trying to like follow what the Buddha says, like that kind of thing, where I feel like more people who say they're Christian don't really try to follow anything that Jesus said. That's just because they were raised the way we were, where it's like, oh, well, I go to church and then I go about my business a lot of time. And that's not, I mean, that's a broad stroke that I'm painting with.
I think that I would say that, so just as, like, in college is different because college kids are just dumb for the most part and they don't even know what they're doing. But, you know, you think about Christianity, I mean, it is, I don't want to say, I hate to use this language, but it is our nation's religion. Like, it's a national religion. You know, and so just like, you know, if you go to places where Buddhism is the national religion or even places where Islam, like, that's just what you know. And so, like, we write off whole countries and groups of people because they're Buddhist or Islam or, you know, Islam and Muslims. And it's like, yeah, but that's just all they've known. And just like how here we represented Jesus for the most part as a country. So we're just Christians because that's what you are when you're here. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, to get into like the real stuff, like there aren't a lot of Jewish people in the sense of like the temple Jewish people, like that all died in 70 AD when the second temple got destroyed by Rome. Like Judaism as you know it from a biblical perspective for the most part doesn't exist anymore. There's Orthodox Jews, but like it's very different than what we think of. Does that make sense? But you still have a lot of Jewish people because they're born in Israel or their family's Jewish. And so I think a lot of people here, like, you know, and I don't want to pick on it, but there's a lot of people that I know that are Catholic. They don't actually know anything about Catholicism. They're just Catholic because my family was born Catholic. And I think that Protestant Christianity has now turned into that in a lot of ways. Like you're just Christian because you were born in a Christian family or you were born in this part of the country and everybody's Christians, you know? And
you're not really following Christ.
You're
as
not
much
following
as you're just
Jesus.
born into
you don't
it.
really know much about him, you know? I mean, I don't want to get real controversial, but when you take Jesus and actually who he was and what he taught us and put it up against Western thinking, it doesn't go well.
Oh, no.
At all.
No.
Like what we do is we pick things that we like that make it seem like they're compatible, but they're not always very compatible.
Well, what do you think the people why do you think, because it sounded like you were going to say when you were discussing the people in these books just now, the term axe to grind with religion, did they have, I've always, so, you know, you have these scholarly people, but, you know, I'll listen to more like comedy kind of things, and even people who don't believe kind of mock Bill Maher, and, you know, he seems to be like like an evangelical atheist. Like he is out to say, hey, there is no God, but he spends so much time talking about it and making movies and stuff. It's like, what's the, like, why is that your life calling?
It depends on who you're reading. I mean, like, so Sam Harris has an axe to grind. And a lot of these guys, so Christopher Hitchens is a little bit different. But like his is more from the educational standpoint, like that they just, I mean, basically, and then some of them, like I think I'm wanting to say, it's been a while since I read it. I'm wanting to say Sam Harris grew up in a religious family, and so it was like forced on him versus being a choice. And I think that kind of started his journey. Hitchens was from the educational perspective of like, you know, hey, there's all these questions and there's all these things, and we're just being presented these things as if they're like how it is. And I don't know if I agree with that, you know.
But they've made that their identity to say, no, this is like, what are they getting from that being there?
Well, they're evangelists. I mean, they're the same thing as that's what they are.
They're just evangelizing nothing.
They're evangelizing
or atheism.
Yeah. You know, and I think that, you know, so here's the thing. Here's the thing about atheism, as far as I understand it. It's a system of faith. So as we would say, we believe in, my faith is in a God of some sorts, and we can get into the semantics of all that, but I think, okay, we don't have to right now. But like, so I believe in a God. I'm theistic in thinking. Atheism is a system of faith. You're believing, you're having faith that there's nothing. Does that make sense? So they're both systems of faith.
Right.
At the end of the day. And so you're believing in this system that this is what's true and real and right, you know. So they're both systems of faith. It's just that atheism is like, well, no, it's anti-faith. No, it's a complete system of faith. You're believing this.
Well, I've just never understood the proselytizing of anti-faith. Like, I understand.
Because I think that what it is if you think you're right. So here's the thing. Most people are not ever going to sign up to do what I do and get on a stage and talk about God.
Right.
But if you got into a conversation with someone who doesn't believe in God and you believe in God, like at some point, like earlier we were talking about winning the argument.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at some point you're going to be like, I want to win because I think I'm right. Like I think that you're wrong for not believing in God. The other side of it is that atheism, although it's not popular, I wouldn't say popular now. I think the part of it is they've been put into a box for so long that once these guys kind of got out there and their voice started getting out there, like it was like, yeah, like there's a whole team. You know what I'm saying? Like we want to prove that we're right while you think you're right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think people are like, oh, atheists are like Satanists. No, they don't believe in any of that. Like that's a whole different category of like Satanism.
Honestly,
and
I
like,
don't even think Satanists really.
but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just a whole different box. But it's like, yeah, it's I don't know. So.
Well, I've always, like, I could understand why whenever people say they're agnostic, I'm like, well, I get that.
So I think most people are actually agnostic. I don't think that there's actually that many, and there are, but I don't think there's that many people when they say they're atheists really know what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like because atheism is saying you literally believe in the existence of nothing. That actually at the end of the day, none of this actually matters. Like nothing you do, nothing you. Now, I would, on the flip side, from the theistic view, say, I don't think some of it matters as much as we think it matters. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think in the grand scheme of all of human existence, we're just blips on the radar. And so I think you should live a good life and do some things. But I think some of our choices aren't as big of a deal as we actually think that they are. Okay, so that's kind of, but with atheism, you're literally saying none of it actually matters. Yeah. And to me, that's just like a dark, depressing view of existence, you know?
Well, like,
go ahead.
So I'm actually curious about these books. When you read them, was there any point where you're like, I can understand that?
I will say this on the podcast, and hopefully I don't get. They make up a lot of good points that I don't have. I've never heard good answers for. Now, some of those good points is more the attacking of religion versus actual existence of God, and so that's where they kind of get into some weird areas where, you know. Because that's the other thing. Not all atheists are necessarily attacking theism. Mm-hmm. They're attacking the theism that we've been presented. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? And so they're actually...
But I mean, I could get on board for some of that.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was saying. So to answer Penny's question, like there were parts where I'm like, okay, like that actually, I can get on board with what you just said. Mm-hmm. Which again sounds funny because of what I do for a living. But these are, here's what I would say. These are not idiots.
Right.
And that's why I tell people you have to be careful with those books because... There's a lot of things because just like, here's the thing. At the end of the day, let me say this. I want to say this. At the end of the day, I'm banking on the fact that I'm right. Mm-hmm. I might not be.
Oh, well.
And there's a piece that's what faith is.
Yeah.
Faith is you're holding on to something that you believe. And in your core, I do believe that a God exists. Mm-hmm. Okay. But there's also the possibility that I could be wrong.
Well, see, I think
most people don't want to acknowledge that because it scares them. Whereas I'm more coming from a system of like, I understand that. Like I'm actually okay with that. Like, I don't know if most people can say that, but me personally, I actually am.
Well, from a personal standpoint, I think, and I don't know, deconstructing is like the fancy word for it now, and then reconstructing if you come back around, whatever it is. But thinking about the way that I was brought up and then what you just said, I mean, a hush would fall over a group of people because so many people that, you know, in the background I have would say, well, no, there's no doubt this is 100%, but then not live a life in any way, shape, or form that would reflect that, but would say, no, I have full confidence and I am right and this is what's going on. And then
I would argue, and I think they
everything.
They do break these points up in the book. So this is, again, going back to, for a lot of these guys in these books, and a lot of people, it's not about like they don't have a problem with the theistic view. Mm-hmm. Their point is, if there is a God, then why are we so awful?
Well, I mean, that's fair.
Like, and like, why are we so bad? And that they do hit that a lot. And like, I mean, Sam Harris is brutal, specifically in the history of Christianity in America. Like all of I mean, he hits hard like slavery. Like you have guys that are legitimately leading churches, going to churches, you know, and we'll just call what is white men leading churches, speaking about God's love, speaking all of this. and leaving and going to auction blocks to buy slaves.
Well, I've heard
so that
people
they
use
can,
the Bible to
and they would justify it, because slavery is in the Bible. And, and he's like brutal with that. And you're like, step back and you go, okay, like, capitalism.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you read the Bible, if you read Jesus is like, you can choose God or you can choose money. And those are your choices. And in capitalistic society, and nobody likes this, but I've said it before from stage, America chose a long time ago what their God was going to be. Yeah. And we went after the money. And so like, that you may disagree with that. That's okay. It's okay to be wrong. But like we went after our God a long time ago. Well, and I would say us as people, sometimes we chose our God a long time ago.
I've heard it said as proof of that, if you look at any major city, at some point, the biggest building in all the downtowns was a church. And then at one point, the office buildings and like the bank buildings.
Yeah, I mean, if you go like historical build, I mean, that's a good point. Like you go to like even places like Boston.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I mean, like Harvard, Yale, those started as religious institutions. Mm-hmm. And now it's like the school of religion is like the joke, of that school. Not necessarily the joke. There's a lot of smart people coming out of there. But a lot of the people that are coming out there aren't actually going into professions to actually promote Christianity or faith. They're actually going into fields just to talk about it from like an historical perspective. Do you know what I'm saying? They're studying religion, but they're not actually believe or whatever themselves. But yeah, I mean, you go to major cities and that's what you go on these tours, and it's like, here's this old historical church, and it's like this little small building, and there's these giant building corporations all around it.
Because at some point we were just like, it's all a monument to what we desire, and it turned to money.
And that's a lot of their points, to kind of wrap that part up, is that like, hey, if you really believed in a God and that every choice that you made actually mattered and was working towards something, then why is as a whole category, not all the time, but a lot of the time, we're so terrible? Mm-hmm. And I mean, politics, I mean, all that stuff. I mean, it's pretty awful.
Yeah. Well, Penny, I don't want you to feel like you're left out at this.
No, it's fine.
I've just turned away from you completely. Okay. I just want to check.
We're good. I'm listening.
All right. So is there anything on the other end that we can help out? So,
well, I think for me, so going back, because you brought it up, so for me, deconstructing is important, and I think people should, if they're willing. Now, here's the other thing. One of the smartest people I know is a guy named Chris Keith, and he's professor of religion in different schools and teaches like Duke and like all these like major schools. Wrote several books. I mean, super smart guy. And he brought up the point one time. He said, I realized a long time ago, because when we would talk, I'm not trying to sound smart, but we're talking on about a very high level of like just theism. Oh, yeah. And he said, I don't have to have these conversations with everybody, because I realized at some point I don't have to drag everybody through my mud. Mm-hmm. He was like, I can't walk away from these conversations because that's where my brain goes. But he's like, I don't need to sit down with, and brought up some people that we know who are like Sunday school teachers. They're fine with, I believe in Jesus. Jesus loves me. They're fine with that. That's their faith. But then there's other of us out there that are like, I believe that, but I have all these other questions and thoughts, and just to say, oh, you just got to believe Jesus loves you and that's enough, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And so like there is a deconstructing process, but then as I said in the sermon, if you just deconstruct something, like nobody does a remodel on a bathroom, gets to the end, it's like, oh, we don't need the toilet, the hole in the ground works. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to reconstruct it as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where a lot of people get confused on deconstruction, is I think it's an important step for some people. I don't think everybody has to do it. Some people are fine with just, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Great, that's your faith. Mm-hmm. But don't criticize the people that are going, okay, I believe that, but I have all this other stuff I want to kind of work through.
Well, so from my point of view of it is like, so my oldest is getting to an age where, she's so much like me, but she's getting ready to, she'll be in high school next year, and I worry about her, in the real world when she gets out there, because I tried to raise her the best way, but I mean, I was raised in a way that I think was good, and it's my parents, they were doing their best to say, keep me involved at church, keep me involved with a Christian school when I was younger, and just make sure that kind of thing went on. But then as I got older, I started seeing you start seeing the flaws, and you start seeing the hypocrisy and things like that. And it's hard to, as a parent, to see like that happened to me. I don't want this to happen to my children. So I've been very honest with a lot of things, like, when I say certain things like this, these are just things that I tell you because you're a child, but these are the things that are important. But is there anything out there that's like, as a way to strengthen that, like you read these books because they're very smart people.
Yeah.
Are there counterpoint books that are, or resources that are the other way? Because I think another big part of a reason a lot of people tend to go that way or start deconstructing is they see the people who label themselves in the loudest outspoken Christians. And I mean, not even in like political ways, but that's not helpful. But I mean, for a while, Kanye West was like the big Christian, or Kirk Cameron. And then they get up and they say something. And I mean, maybe even fully in the right when the way they're thinking, but you're saying this person is a highly intelligent person who does not believe in God. And he's going to tear somebody like Kirk Cameron apart because he is a not very smart person who believes in God. Yeah. And there's no argument. In a debate, he's losing every time. But that doesn't disprove God. Well, it just disproves this person's intelligence.
I think that's part of it is that we've turned it into a debate. So the biggest, I mean, we haven't even talked about the biggest thing. The biggest factor in most people when they start to question is when you go science versus religion. Like that's the big.
It's no good.
That's the big one. Yeah. I think what I've always said is I am not going to allow people to determine the battle lines for me. And so people have said, well, you're either science or you're religious. And I'm like, well, no, they actually go hand in hand a lot more than you realize. And there's a lot of things in religion that can't be explained without understanding a scientific worldview. There's a lot of things in science that, if they're honest, which that's the problem, is they don't want to be because you have two extremes that are talking. There's a lot of things in science that aren't always understandable. Like there's a lot of things in science that are like, that shouldn't work, but it does. And so maybe there's something else that's factored in there that's made that happen. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I think that's a part of it is you get these debates and sometimes you're debating the wrong question. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the Bible can answer all of the questions. If I'm being honest, people are going to hate this, can answer all of the questions about the world and the universe and its existence other than God created. Okay, there's your answer. But I don't know if it gets into the semantics of all of what that means.
Yeah, like magnets.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think that we want to be like, oh, well, just it's in the Bible. Well, no, some of it's not. Like it's actually not all in there. So I think that's like the big one. I think the biggest thing for kids, and you talked about kids, is I remember, and I'm going to come full circle to what we talked about a minute ago. I remember asking questions and just getting lied to.
Oh yeah, well
like that's what people would make stuff up because they didn't know. And because they were afraid to admit they didn't have an answer, they would just, I mean, I had, and I won't mention names, I had, when I was in high school, I went to our senior pastor about a question that I had. And now knowing what I do know, I know that he straight up made up the answer. You know what I'm saying? And I don't, okay, so here's the thing, I'll be fair. Maybe he didn't make up the answer. Maybe he had heard it from somewhere, but he didn't actually investigate this himself. He just gave me this, here's your answer, hope it works. And I remember like walking out of his office and being like, no,
right?
Like, no, I don't have to get into the semantics of the question, but it was, I just remember walking up and going, no, like that's not an acceptable answer. And B, I don't believe that. I don't, and I think that was part of it is, and even as kids, like, we make up stuff sometimes and like, cause we don't want to be like, I don't know, but I think that's okay. I think it's okay to say, I don't know sometimes.
Well, I think as an adult, like that's one of the things to just, it's a sign of intelligence to go, you know what, I don't know. Yeah. And I can help you find the answer. I can look into it, but to just not to have that attitude where I do know this and I say it out loud. And
I always remind people from the stage, I say this, but when I talk to people, I always tell people, I don't know, let me see what I can do or come up with something. But I always quick to remind people, I don't know if this side of life will ever know. Mm-hmm. Like, I actually don't know. Like, I don't know if we will actually get an answer to what you're asking. And I think that makes people uncomfortable because they want it. And I'm like, no, that's actually, like, if, from the theistic view, if God exists the way we think God exists, our finite brains will not be able to comprehend fully whatever he is. Right. Or, you know what I'm saying? Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. And so there's just certain things we're not going to have answers for. And that's faith again. That's that reality of, I believe this, I've investigated, I've looked, there's things that have happened in my life that I can't explain without some type of theistic view. And so I do have faith based on those things. At the end of the day, I also have to go to sleep believing and having faith, but also knowing, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and until you actually get okay with that, I don't know if sometimes you're going to be helpful in the conversations.
Well,
but I could be wrong. Again, I don't know.
Yeah. Who's to say, right?
Yeah, who's to say? Yeah, who's to say?
So
I know I've been to Huck's. That's all I can say.
Well, so what is like an actionable thing that we could do if we're having these kind of thoughts? Is there?
I think that there's a lot of resources, some good, some bad. There's a plethora of podcasts out there. So if you're a podcast person, I think the biggest thing for most people is just acknowledging it. Mm-hmm. I think that people think that if I acknowledge it, that means I don't have faith. Or if I acknowledge it, that like God's going to be mad at me, or like my church is going to be mad at me. And I'm like, no, like I don't think any of those things are
And
true.
if they are, that's maybe not the church for you.
Yeah, I think that
you're looking for answers.
Here's the thing. When you get into like a real study of this stuff, like, so my favorite moments are when I'm sitting down with somebody and they're bringing me their problems and they'll ask me these questions and I'm like, yeah, me too. That's actually like a really good question. I actually don't know. Like, and it's almost like what's crazy is you see the relief on their face because they were worried that I was going to give them some stock answer or that like, and we just be like, no, you know what? I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'll admit that, but I've actually have studied this quite a bit. I actually don't know if like what to do with that. And they'll be like, okay. And then it's almost like freedom for them of like, okay, like that's okay that I feel like this, so that I have it's okay.
I always tell my kids, like, especially when they ask questions and I'm like, I don't know. I remind them that we need to be good listeners and listen to what other people like have to say about it.
Yeah.
Or different religions or people that are just different from us or don't believe in God, just because I feel like they'll start to connect the dots a little better.
Yeah.
If there's maybe some like beginning source of it. Does that make sense?
Well, and I think going along with that, like if I sat down with somebody, I could not sit down with Richard, Sam Harrison win a debate. Like he would murder, I'll just go and admit it, he would murder me in a debate. But if I'm sitting down with somebody that's an atheist, there's a lot of them that I could win. Mm-hmm. Like I could be like, okay, I've actually read your boy's stuff. Like I understand what he's saying. I could win that debate because they're just regurgitating, what they've heard. And I'm like, well, okay. So there's holes, just like there's holes in what you're saying about God, there's holes in the atheistic view as well. So let's be fair. But did I really win anything? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think goes back to the winning we're doing full circle, winning the argument.
I'm good at this, I'm telling you.
Like I don't know, I might win the argument but lose the person.
Right.
And so I don't know if the goal is always to win. And I always tell people, like, here's the reality. When we think about faith, I can't save anybody. Mm-hmm. I cannot debate you into believing God. Okay, because you know what I'm saying? Like that is, I do believe that is a personal decision you have to make, and that's your journey. Now, I do believe that's the best. I mean, I love Brady Brown. You have to believe everybody's doing the best they can with what they got. I do think that's the best choice. I do believe that there is God. And I think Jesus I believe that he's meant what he said, that he's the best version of God. He's going to show us what God is like and what it means to be human because we're created. But when it comes to like debating somebody, all the semantics, like I might win that, but did I really win anything? Versus, hey, like we don't see this the same way, but I'm still going to love you. We can still eat meals together. We can still, do these type of things.
Well, I think to tie this whole thing together, like we joked earlier, like we were looking at the Olympic things and we were excited because America won so many medals and we were the best because we won, and we have, and I'm assuming it's not worldwide, this kind of thinking, but being raised in this country that we have to win. Like the goal is not to be correct. The goal is to win. So like when we have these debates, and if it's religious or if it's political or if it's our marriage or things like that, the goal should be you see both sides, you understand, and you can still keep your opinion and they can keep their opinion, but someone shouldn't walk away from an interaction as a loser. But if you're going to win, then the other person lost. And then that person, you don't get them on your side. But like I said, with my wife, like when we do have arguments, it's because something has gone wrong because I can't think of another way than to not bring it up. But there's so many things that I would say that I was right about. But if I'm going to say, hey, you are wrong because this is going on and this is going on, in a debate, I would win, but who does that help?
Right.
So, I mean, that's the same. It sounds like with this kind of thing, if I could point to you and hit you over the head with this over and over and say, I'm going to win this because you can't argue your point, that doesn't make you any more right. It just makes me not like you. And whatever point you were trying to make is now moot because, more divisive.
There's a verse, I was trying to look it up and I'll find it for a later reference. I'll do it. But like, there's a verse, I think it's in John, and there's a reference in Acts to it too, where it's like, let's think about this. Jesus went to towns. He's God in a body, right? He's best representative of God, all these things. Not everybody believed. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that's to me, I've always been like, you know, he would go to these places and do these things. And then there's like this verse and it said, and some believe. So they just saw a resurrected Jesus and it says, and some believed. And I was like, you look at that verse and you're like, what else you got to do to get people to believe?
Right.
But like, there's no other follow up to that. It's just, and some believed. And it's like, okay, like, and some believed, you know, and that's okay. Like, and maybe some don't, and maybe they never will. And I don't know. That's way above my pay grade.
Well, that's not your job to say, hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always think about that. Like, just like think about that. Like, Jesus went to these towns and he left some of them, and not everybody believed. So it's okay.
Well, all right. Well, I think this is a good point as any to end it. Next week is our big state fair. So the next podcast, I'm sure we'll have all kinds of wild tales.
Well, food reviews.
Food reviews, Midway reviews, pouring out a Mountain Dew for
Freddie.
for Freddie. And we'll see. We're here every Sunday, 10 and 11:15 at Journey Church, online and in person. So check us out, and thanks for listening.